The year 2000 was a big one for me. As well as being a brand new millennium, it was also the year that I turned 18 and could finally go out drinking in bars and clubs. An activity which kept its novelty for a couple of months before I realised that most alcoholic drinks taste awful, I couldn't really handle hangovers, and I was just as averse to being around other humans drunk as I was sober, if not more so. Aside from that, it's one of the greatest years for gaming ever, seeing the launch of the PlayStation 2 and all the new wonders it had to offer, while on the PC, where I did all my gaming at the time, we got the likes of Diablo 2, the original Hitman, and Baldur's Gate 2. But the first-person shooter was still the king of PC gaming. Half-Life was now 2 years old, and still serving as the gold standard for shooting games at the time, and people were arguing over which was better out of Unreal Tournament and Quake 3. And it's into this domain that stepped quite possibly my favourite game of all time. A bizarre offspring of Half-Life and System Shock, powered by the Unreal Engine, and forged by the hands of the people at Ion Storm. The good one, not these guys. Came an action RPG that merged cyberpunk style, conspiracy theory plots, game mechanics and level design that really just let you play your way, and storytelling with real depth and heart. And while this game is absolutely showing its age in this modern age of ray tracing and 3D worlds so vast and beautiful that you just want to live there, I found myself playing through it now, 21 years after its original release, with the same excitement and enjoyment as I did on that first playthrough all that time ago on my janky old PC that could barely run it on its lowest settings. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I present to you my Perfect 10. This is Deus Ex. Set in a dystopian near future, our game opens on two characters we are not yet familiar with, expositing the game's basic setup. The world is now in the grip of a lethal pandemic called the Grey Death, and it would seem a single, powerful entity has control over the only vaccine supply. They have deliberately throttled the production and distribution of this life-saving drug to exploit the rich, powerful and privileged, and begin asserting nothing less than total control over the world's governments. Meanwhile, we see that the poverty gap has widened considerably, and with people dying in the streets, the tension and unrest has spilled over into outright violence, leading to the police responding with excessive force and... Whoa. Just stop a second. How could they possibly have known? Long ago. Terrorist attacks on the United States that left Lady Liberty somewhat worse for wear led to the formation of the United Nations Anti-Terrorist Coalition, aka UNATCO, and it is into the shoes of one of their fresh-faced new agents that we, as the player, will now step. Codenamed JC, yes, that's exactly what you think it means. Trust me, this game isn't subtle with its metaphors. We are a new, super advanced, augmented human, and as we take control we discover that our investors are ready to see what we're capable of. Augmentation at this stage in humanity has become a regular thing, and is one of the staples of cyberpunk fiction in general, along with ideas of transhumanism and what it means to be a person in general. The later installments in this series take place in the early days of human augmentation, and follow its social impact, but we'll get to those in their own good time. For now, we are JC Denton, a new, super advanced nano-org, who, rather than grafting chrome onto his body, or simply replacing entire limbs with cybernetic prosthetics, has tiny nanomachines pumping through his blood that can make changes to his body at a molecular level and grant him the superhuman abilities he'll need to get the job done, and give him a voice that's all gravel.
You mechs might have copper wiring to reroute your fear of pain, but I've got nerves of steel.
It's difficult to choose one feature of Deus Ex and highlight it as the best point. Between the systems, level design and combat, there's just so much to love. But for me, the story shines out as the game's most compelling feature. I am, overall, a lover of good stories, and I've even tried to write a few myself. They are the primary reason I play games, I love to be taken to new worlds and become someone completely different. A good story for me can transform a mediocre experience into something truly wonderful, while I have little to no patience for grindy multiplayer-focused gameplay loops. But people play games for all kinds of reasons, and there's no wrong way to enjoy a game. I'm not a speedrunner myself, for example, but I do enjoy watching a good speedrun on Twitch. The story of Deus Ex is a globe-spanning spy adventure, encompassing social and political issues such as the dangers of unchecked capitalism, human rights and police brutality, and the struggles of those in poverty living in a dangerous dog-eat-dog world. There are global conspiracies including the Illuminati, and players including militant resistance groups and the Hong Kong Triads. What starts with a terrorist raid on a vaccine shipment on Liberty Island will end in the depths of Area 51, with JC ultimately deciding the fate of humanity, either letting it stagnate at the hands of the old conspirators, plunging it into an information dark age, or merge his mind with a powerful AI and become a transcendent being capable of governing the world as its supreme enlightened dictator. A god from the machine, as it were. In truth, there is no right answer to this dilemma, and the road from start to end is filled with danger and tragedy. Deus Ex falls into the dystopian sci-fi genre known as cyberpunk, something originally conceived in William Gibson's Neuromancer, a book that, if you haven't already, I highly recommend you all read. This spawned many great books, movies, and even a few games that you might have heard of. The staples of the genre include ultra-capitalism, corporate superpowers that eclipse world governments in their wealth and power, cybernetic body modification, and rebellion against oppressive powers that seek to subjugate and control the masses. Our protagonist, JC, is a now top-of-the-line super soldier working for the United Nations, and given the themes of cyberpunk and the excessively brutal way policing seems to be handled in this world, you can probably guess that JC might not be batting for the good guys at the start of the story.
That is what happens to a prisoner who tries to escape.
I'm not going to give a play-by-play of the entire story. Honestly, just go play the game. It'd probably take about the same amount of time for me to explain everything to you. JC's mission takes him around New York City to discover his own brother is now working as a double agent, and even convinces him to betray UNATCO and help the resistance. This culminates with JC trapped in a cell with his kill switch, something built into every augmented person, counting slowly down to the end of his life. He is sprung by a mysterious entity known as Daedalus, and soon discovers that UNATCO is just a front for a dark conspiracy known as Majestic 12. After a daring escape, he flees as far as Hong Kong to settle a war between the Triads, befriend a man named Tracer Tong who can defeat his kill switch, and ultimately discover that Majestic 12 is the private military army of a massive super corporation called VersaLife, and its enigmatic president, Bob Page. The company is responsible for creating not only JC's nano-augmentations and the vaccine for the Grey Death, but it also used the same technology to actually develop and spread the virus in a bid to seize control of worldwide governments. This ultimately ties into older conspiracies with the now disbanded Illuminati, the head of which, Morgan Everett, a man with seemingly good intentions, we have to contact. Then there is the creation of a super AI called Helios that can be merged with a properly augmented human host to create the ultimate enlightened being, and the final desperate rush to stop the plague, bring down the mastermind behind it all, and decide the ultimate fate of the human race once and for all. JC can either take the crown of centralized power for himself, hand it back to the Illuminati, or destroy it along with global communications and plunge humanity into a technological dark age. It's a hell of a ride, all told through some incredibly well voice-acted characters, well-designed environments created with a minimal palette, brought on by the technological limitations of the era, and all manner of hidden political and philosophical ideas that leave us thinking and wondering about the nature of humanity and our world. And something that in 2021, when I'm writing this, is oh so relevant now. This may be one of the most ambitious stories told through a game, and it executes it so well. You aren't beaten over the head with any one ideology, and you have a lot of free rein to decide things about who JC is, and ultimately map some of your own beliefs onto him. I personally could not imagine my JC ever merging with Helios. #NotMyJC. As I felt he would be disgusted at the idea of centralized power by the end of the game, and maybe didn't even trust himself merged with a super AI, to be a truly benevolent dictator. Likewise, Everett's goals of simply returning things to how they were in the early 2000s sounds nice on paper, but it's simply placing humanity into a holding pattern, and his morals are more than a little questionable.
I merely await certain technologies. Then I will be restored. Everett has sworn it.
A harmless fantasy. He also thinks I'm going to restore his body.
You aren't?
The technology has been around for decades, but he does not need to know that.
But I've had lengthy conversations with people who saw it the other way, and they were all really interesting. The game's systems are deep, and your choices here, as everywhere else, matter a lot. While some of the mechanics may not represent JC as a highly trained advanced augmented super agent, they do serve to have a powerful impact on the way you play. There's an experience point-based skill system and an upgradable augmentation system to help power up your character for his job. We can dip our toes into the water during character creation, where we have a few options for what we want our avatar to look like, and you'll probably have enough skill points to spec into about 3 skills. Even from this early stage though, you should probably start thinking about how you want to play the game, which is a little unfair, because aside from a basic tutorial level, you won't have really had any chance to dirty your hands with any of the game's systems. There are a variety of skills, and a few of them are definitely throwaway ones that will have such a limited use as to not be worth investing in at all. Combat skills will affect your ability with various weapons, such as accuracy and damage output. A somewhat realistic touch this game has is that by standing still and taking your time to aim your weapon, you will greatly increase your accuracy when you fire. This makes a run and gun playstyle somewhat difficult to pull off, especially at the start of the game. The 3 major spy skills of hacking, lockpicking, and electronics are going to impact how long it will take for you to perform actions relating to these, and how many of your limited resources you'll blow through trying to do it. Being better or worse in one of these will impact which routes are available to you down the line, but it's overall a good idea to spec into at least one level with everything. Of course, doors that can't be picked can be blown off their hinges with demolitions, until the later game anyway, but these are noisy and alert guards, as well as posing a risk to yourself and generally being better used elsewhere in the game. The game rewards you with skill points and money for exploration and objective completion, but it places you on a very tight leash overall. Even if you explore every nook and cranny in the game, you aren't going to have anywhere near enough skill points to max out all your skills. So while you'll certainly have a broader range of options in the late game, you'll probably find yourself coming back to the weapons and playstyle you chose at the very start. Another area to consider is money and trade, and your inventory loadout, which is handled differently in this game than in more traditional RPGs. For money, you'll get paid for completing your operations initially, however later in the game, you'll have to resort to theft by hacking ATMs, or finding credit chits in the world and on the bodies of enemies that you take down. This game doesn't have any merchants exactly. Certainly not ones with extensive inventories of randomized items that are willing to buy all of your unwanted crap to help you get enough cash together to buy the new weapon upgrade you want. But the right person will sell you anything from beer and information to some mines and a rocket launcher. These merchants are also quite expensive. However, some of them will offer discounts in exchange for favors, and these are worth taking up, as this isn't a world of fetch quests and busy work.
Contamination.
Well,
Where?
I mean, maybe the woman in Paris who wants the Greasels killed, but she's out of her mind.
Hurrah, my kitties! Now they can go out to play and not get eaten!
Most of the side gigs have their own stories, with characters and arcs and often unique locations. These will also provide skill points for exploration, mission completion, and the discounts are substantial.
I'll give you a scope that will fit most.
So how do you play? Well, if you think Deus Ex is an FPS, you're in for a big surprise. It's more like an RPG with FPS elements than anything else. I've also heard Deus Ex described as a stealth game before, but I don't think that's really the case. I do think that using the game's stealth mechanics are an important part of any playthrough, but overall, I'd say this is an exploration game more than anything else. Whatever your location or objective, you are overall best taking some time to explore and get a full grasp of all possible routes to where you need to go before really committing to anything. This part is best done quietly. You won't have enough lockpicks for every door or multi-tools for every keypad, but exploring will turn up keys, codes, and passwords, though these may be a little more difficult to acquire without certain augmentations. You'll also find vents to crawl through or computers to hack, which will let you open doors, shut down cameras, or even turn the security on the guards, sowing discord and opening up routes to your objectives. Even boss fights are somewhat optional, as by uncovering the right information, they can be defeated without ever firing a shot, or simply escaped from.
I know your UNATCO kill phrase. The Putin machine.
I am not a machine.
Sticks and stones.
Either way, you'll get the most out of any mission by taking your time to explore your location and then make an informed decision about your route. This could mean going full silent assassin, with thermoptic camo and a 0 body count, or lining up a straight shot to your objective and going in guns blazing. But whatever you choose, your most satisfying outcome will be achieved by first taking your time to explore your surroundings and moving cautiously forward from there. And nowhere is this more apparent than in the first mission on Liberty Island. This is no pushover, and it isn't because it throws everything at you at once, but rather because you're ill-equipped to deal with basically anything. And even at later levels in the game, base enemies are dangerous in a shootout. You may be a super spy, but your accuracy with most weapons will be terrible. You might not even be able to hack computers yet, none of your augmentations are installed or operational, and if you're thinking of using the tranquilizer crossbow to do silent takedowns from the get-go, well, I've some bad news for you. Likewise, a straight-up guns blazing approach is quickly going to leave you without ammunition and overwhelmed by the game's enemies. This may seem really daunting at the start, but when you understand how things work in this game, going back to this idea of exploration first, you'll soon see that you have a vast array of options to approach your target at the top of the statue. Taking down the right enemies quietly can turn up a key or a passcode, and spare you the precious few resources you have at your disposal. On the other side of the island, there's a contact you can talk to get more information on the situation. You can enlist a captured agent as an ally. You can just stack a bunch of boxes up at the side of the statue and climb up into the upper areas. There's even a disgruntled soldier who's as clueless as you are as to why they aren't backing you up on this operation, selling weapon upgrades for you to invest in if you can get enough cash together early on. The sheer number of options in this opening level, and indeed every subsequent mission, is just incredible, and each will give you a slightly different experience, and even say something about your JC and how he does his job. Are you a cold-blooded killer? Are you a by-the-book law enforcement officer? Do you avoid trouble or look for it? What's really cool is that other characters in the game will have something to say about this later too. Eventually, however, you'll be funneled up to the top of the statue to complete the mission and get a good earful of the game's other big staple. This game, like so much cyberpunk fiction, has a lot to say about society and philosophy, and you're going to be hearing a lot about it from start to finish. Whoever said games shouldn't be political has never played this. Deus Ex is probably best described as a hub world style game. These types of game bear some resemblance to open world games, but take place in much smaller, tighter environments overall. The basic idea is that the game has one or several locations where role-playing takes place. Here, information can be gathered, side quests can be found, items and weapons can be traded, etc. before the player leaves to enter a dungeon area to deal with hostile NPCs and complete objectives. Hub worlds have a big focus on exploration and usually have lots of secrets and Easter eggs worked into them for players to find. These can usually be returned to after completing objectives, and time may also pass in the process, meaning some areas will be closed off the next time you visit, and some areas may be opened up. While Deus Ex is an exploration-focused game, it does follow a linear-focused story. This is one of the benefits of a hub world game over a go-anywhere, do-anything-you-want open world, where you can be told you only have a matter of hours left to live unless you complete the final mission, and then the game will let you go exploring and do all kinds of other side jobs and activities while time passes without notice. The trade-off here is that these world spaces may not be available to you at any time you want. In Deus Ex, you fly from New York to Hong Kong to Paris and various other places, and while you will be making more than one trip to quite a few places, they will eventually be closed to you. Hell's Kitchen is the first location you'll visit of this nature, and is a goldmine of environmental storytelling and great characters and conversations. The focus here seems to be on showing the poverty that has befallen much of the world, throwing homelessness, prostitution, and organized crime in our faces, along with a free clinic that's full of diseased and dying people infected with the Grey Death, and talking about the ambrosia vaccine like it's a myth that only the super rich have access to. Which is sort of the case. There are so many people to interact with and events to get involved with here, and it all goes to rounding out your view of the world and discovering just who your JC is and how he deals with these problems.
You've got 10 seconds to beat it before I add you to the list of NSF casualties.
Hell's Kitchen is good, but later, we get to go to Hong Kong. As incredible as the Hell's Kitchen hub world is, the game really hits its stride in Hong Kong. This is still my favourite area in the game, and is a place that brings up quite a few conflicting emotions for me. You see, the first time I came here, I hadn't known that Paul could be saved. My JC had seen his brother, already dying from his kill switch, and too far gone to save. Then, the apartment was raided by high-level MIB enemies that he was ill-equipped to fight. Following his brother's instructions, he dived through the window while Paul had made a heroic last stand, and finally been cornered and taken down by Gunther Hermann. While breaking out of the Inatco prison, now run by Majestic 12, he found his brother's body was being kept on ice to run tests on. That was really the moment things started to change for my JC. Of course, subsequent playthroughs of the game were a little different, because as I've mentioned before, this is a game where your choices matter. But not only does Hong Kong represent a major turning point in the game's narrative, it's also a huge change of pace and tone overall. Hell's Kitchen did a good job of showing the extreme levels of poverty that had befallen the world now, and the excessive force used by law enforcement to oppress dissidents among this class. Hong Kong, however, is a bustling, exciting metropolis of neon lights, tightly packed streets filled with trade and drinks, and dark streets filled with danger and intrigue. All of this is painted with a minimalistic palette too, lacking anything near the power needed to create a realistic crowded city that stretches on for miles in all directions. The Hong Kong hub world instead gives us just enough information, with its well-crafted streets and music, and lets our imaginations fill in the rest. Even so, it really captures that atmosphere, the likes of which we see in movies like Blade Runner and shows like Altered Carbon, and sets the same incredible science fiction feel. I love the way the shops and restaurants just seem to be crammed in anywhere, as though the desperate struggles for space has led to more and more creativity in this venture. And just to be clear, I've been to the Wan Chai market in Hong Kong, and there's a lot here that really resembles it. It's here we first come into contact with the Hong Kong triads, and are introduced to Tracer Tong, Maggie Chow, and even our first encounter with Bob Page. Maggie Chow is one of the better villains in the game, and her arc is one of my favourite memories of my first playthrough. Tasked with reconciling the war between the rival triad gangs of the Red Arrows and the Luminous Path by returning a stolen nanotech sword called the Dragon's Tooth, JC is directed to the penthouse suite of former actress Maggie Chow, who is somehow mixed up in all of this. On my first playthrough, Paul died in the hotel room in Hell's Kitchen, and JC's whole world was flipped on its head. He wasn't, to my mind, holding up so well at this point. Miss Chow expresses that she not only knew Paul, but had even been intimate with him. She expresses grief along with pleading her innocence in this triad affair, claiming that the data that could vindicate her was actually in the evidence locker of the police station downtown. A little skeptical, but not without sympathy, my JC agreed to hear Maggie Chow out and go investigate this. Doing so meant that he had to pacify several officers, who were just doing their job for the night, along the way, and when he finally got down into the evidence locker he found... it was all a lie. The actress had performed her role perfectly and played me. She'd played on my grief and a need to find another to share that with, played on my heroic nature, and manipulated me in hopes of making me into a criminal and finally, a corpse. My weapons of choice up until that point had almost exclusively been the stun prod and the tranquilizer darts and the crossbow, for better or worse. But for this, there was only one outcome. Returning to Hong Kong on subsequent playthroughs, and with Paul alive and safe, it becomes apparent that you only need to look a little deeper into Miss Chow's apartment to find all you need. There are terminals to hack, keypads to bypass, and even a back way in to exploit, all to reach the same end. This one mission is so symbolic of the levels of interactivity and the depth of storytelling woven through this game that makes it an unmatched classic even now. All of the hub worlds are overflowing with locks to pick, computers to hack, and people to talk to. You never really feel like you're grinding or having your time wasted by the game just to stretch out the playtime. True, not all the voice acting is up to scratch, but all the major players are giving outstanding performances and really selling the story and the world to you. Likewise, everything you do is ultimately in the service of the main objectives, so you never feel like you're getting sidetracked or just pottering around for the hell of it. Given just how much I've talked this game off, it may seem a little unbelievable that I have anything bad to say about it. Likewise, it seems a little pointless to criticize a 21-year-old game when so much of it can just be written off as it's a product of its era. But even so, this game didn't look that great even in its day. The AI is also something of a joke, though again, it's not better or worse than, say, Metal Gear Solid. I think the biggest issue for me is the weapon animations. It's not an issue initially, but as you get more recoil dampening mods and silencers for your weapons, you lose all sense of feedback when using your weapons. Weapon animation and sound effects are supposed to let you really feel the weapon you are using, and make using them feel very satisfying. This works early in the game when everything is loud and kicks like a mule, but once you've upgraded JC and his gear enough, you may as well be double-clicking a file instead of firing a gun. But these are nitpicks, and I'm not expecting Warren Spector to watch this and issue a patch for the game 20 years later. It's just here because this is a review, as well as a nostalgia kick. No game is perfect, even when viewed as a product of its time, so there's no harm in highlighting a few flaws. Wait until we talk about Anachronox. That one's special for all the right and wrong reasons. If you came here with no idea about this game, or maybe having only played the newer entries in the series, then I really hope I've convinced you to give this a try. It's hard to separate my experience of playing it from my own nostalgia of being 18 and playing through it for the first time, but I really believe it stands up even after all this time. I've played a lot of amazing games since this came out, but I've yet to encounter anything with this much depth that really made me feel like what I was doing in the world actually mattered. Deus Ex also released at a time when I felt like every PC game could have mods. It's actually the first game I ever tried making mods for. I never got very far, but it got me interested in the world of game development. I was going to dedicate some time in this video to talking about the mods that have been made for this masterpiece. But the fact that there are so many really ambitious projects has inspired me to dedicate their own video to them, which I'll put together after I've finished this series. If there's anything you'd like me to look at or check out for the video, then drop me a comment and I'll take a look. For everyone who took the time to watch this far, thank you so much. I had a blast putting this together, and I'm looking forward to continuing down this rabbit hole. And with the push of a button, we end our mission with JC, leaving the world to an unknown future. Our choices will impact the future of mankind in drastically different ways, and could lead to its salvation or total damnation. But that's in fate's hands now. We won't have the power to control the fate of humanity in this world again for another 20 years, where once again, nanotechnology, global terrorism, and old conspiracies will rise to try to seize the crown of the world, and we will be thrust into the shoes of Alex D, a soldier fighting an invisible war.